With everything revealed about Update 1.1 and Early Access giving us a window into the upcoming characters, how they are going to work, and the sort of teams that will excel with them, it's time for us to analyze and compare the upcoming limited S-rank characters, the Electric Stunner Qingyi and the Physical Anomaly unit Jane Doe. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is DarkHero and let's get started. So let's go ahead and talk about everything we know about each character, how they can improve your teams and bring value to your account. Starting with Qingyi, our first limited S-rank stun unit. Qingyi is an electric character that shares the same faction as Ryuan and Seth, the new Eridu public safety team, and she brings a lot of value to a specific type of characters. What's most interesting about Qingyi is that she's going to be spending a lot more time on field compared to other stunners, as Qingyi's gameplay formula is going to revolve around using her normal basic attacks to build up her unique gauge, the Flash Connect Voltage, that will then allow her to use her modified heavy attack, with which she can then proc her core passive Eternal Seasons, which will enable Qingyi to increase the stun damage multiplier by an additional 60%, so the damage you deal to enemies when they are stunned would go up from 150% to a maximum of 210%. Just for reference, I believe that the only other character that can currently increase the stun damage multiplier is Lycaon, that can increase it by 35%, so it would be a 185% stun damage multiplier versus the 210% stun damage multiplier with Qingyi's passive at max stacks. This is going to result in much more damage from the rest of the team, especially for burst characters that don't like to spend as much time on field and rely on having the enemy stunned to deal increased damage. That is naturally going to be the perfect pair for Qingyi, as not only is she an attacker and shares the same faction, but Ryuan also deals increased damage to stun targets thanks to her core passive, and her damage outside of her burst window really isn't anything impressive. Again, she's more of a burst DPS, so she actually enjoys the fact that Qingyi is going to be spending a significant amount of time on field. However, this comes with a couple of very big downsides which we'll address in a moment. Now, the best thing about Qingyi and what truly makes her a universal unit is the fact that her additional ability, which is going to increase the amount of days that Qingyi deals, while also increasing her attack at the same time, is something that can be activated by simply having one attack type character on your team. This is absolutely nuts, as it's going to make fitting Qingyi into any team incredibly easy. It looks like ZZZ is going into the direction where upcoming characters are going to have less team building restrictions by preferring characters of a certain role rather than a specific element, as Ryuan also only requires a support character to trigger her additional ability rather than characters that share the same attribute. So if you don't have Lycaon or Koleda, you can totally fit Qingyi into an ice team with Ellen or a fire team with Soldier 11 for example, and you'll be totally fine. Now, that being said, the reason why I said there are a couple of downsides with Qingyi is the fact that, for one, she doesn't innately get any sort of defensive shred or elemental shred like Lycaon has, which ultimately still makes him the best in slot stunner for Ellen and ice teams in general. And that leads me to the next point, where we can kind of expect future stun characters to eventually come out and offer some sort of defensive shred or elemental shred, which would naturally end with Qingyi being power crept. And the other downside of Qingyi is that, again, she is a stunner that likes to spend a lot of time on field, and that means that most of the other DPSs in the game, like Ellen, Soldier 11 and Nekomata for example, that like to spend a lot of time on field, are not going to be as effective as a result, because you're going to be competing for field time with these characters. So the future value of Qingyi is going to be very much dependent on how exactly the future DPS characters are going to work. If we get more burst DPS characters in the future, then she is going to bring more value, but if they end up being the more standard on field DPS characters, then Qingyi is always going to have that problem, because compared to the other stunners in the game, while Qingyi is capable of stunning the enemies very quickly, she does take a bit of time to ramp up. So compared to Koleda, who is a very fast and burst stunner that can use her EX skill followed by a couple of basic attacks to build up a ton of days, or even Lycaon that can get a lot of days done by using his EX special, with Qingyi you're going to need to spend a lot of time, and even though you may end up stunning the enemy quicker, that can also lead to some problems, because if you don't spend enough time with your support character or with your attacker, you may not be able to build up enough energy to then use their EX specials whenever you get the enemy stunned, or you don't even build up enough decibels to then be able to use your ultimate during the burst window, at which point stunning the enemy that quickly could result in a DPS loss. So there is going to be a little bit of a skill issue component with Qingyi that you're going to need to master, otherwise you may run into some issues where you end up losing some damage. Now, one very cool thing about Qingyi that I haven't mentioned before is that that she can actually dodge any incoming attacks by using her modified heavy attack. Additionally, while she is spamming her basic attack 3, where she kind of stays in the same place and keeps spamming the same electric attack over and over, creating this big electric field on the floor, you can quite simply dash to avoid an attack in the middle of that, and if you press the attack button again, you will immediately go back to the basic attack 3, so she has a lot of survivability, which means that it's going to be very easy to use her on field. Now let's go over the teams that I believe that Qingyi is going to excel in before I talk about the final pull value for this character. Now naturally the mono electric teams are going to be wonderful for Qingyi, so going with something like Qingyi, Rina and Grace, Qingyi, Rina and Anton, or even Qingyi, Anton and Grace are all going to be very powerful, although with all three of these teams, especially with the final one, the characters are going to be competing for field time, which again is a problem with Qingyi. Now naturally the team that is not going to have that problem is going to be the Ether Force team, comprised of Qingyi, Nicole and Zhuyuan. This is going to be by far the best team that Qingyi is going to excel in, as both Nicole and Zhuyuan do not spend a lot of time on field, and Qingyi really is going to help Zhuyuan propel to the #1 uncontested slot in DPS, as the numbers that she is going to be able to pump out during the burst DPS window are going to be insane. And lastly, given that Qingyi is going to work with just about any attackers, you have a lot of different options when it comes to the rest of the elemental teams. So for example, you could go for an ice team with Soukaku and Ellen, a fire team with Lucy and Soldier 11, and just about any other team is going to work because Qingyi is a very competent stunner, and again her additional ability allows her to fit into any team, so long as it has an attack character. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, Qingyi is going to be a direct upgrade over Anby, as they are both electric stun characters that also like to spend some time on field. It's kind of sad that such a cool character with an awesome design is already being power crept by an S rank character, but I guess that's just something that ZZZ is doing. They want to power creep the A rank characters because that is going to lead to an increase in sales. And unfortunately, Anby also has a couple of problems where her kit isn't specialized in increasing the impact stats. It's kind of split between impact and attack, and that is of course going to make it so that her job as a stun character is going to be less effective than any other stunner in the game that only needs to focus on the impact stats. So ultimately, Qingyi is going to be a character that I recommend you to go for if either you are planning on maxing Zhuyuan's damage potential, or if you don't have any S rank stun characters. So if you don't have Lycaon, if you don't have Koleda, and you have only been relying on Anby so far, then Qingyi is going to bring great value to you. Otherwise, I don't think that there is a lot of reasons for you to pull for Qingyi, especially considering that her banner is going to feature Billy and Corin, which aren't very powerful characters, so you don't even get the A rank character appeal to summon on that banner to get more copies of them. Me personally, I have an M1 Zhuyuan, and as such, Qingyi is going to bring a ton of value to my account, so I am definitely not going to be skipping her. Now that being said, it's time for us to talk about Jane Doe. Jane Doe is going to be our first S rank limited anomaly character, and she is looking incredibly awesome. We already know quite a lot about Jane Doe, even though some of her details are still a bit hidden. For example, we know that she is going to be a physical character, but her faction is currently unknown. That being said, it was made evident through a lot of trailers that Jane Doe is going to have an important connection to the new Eridu public safety team, especially with one of those trailers putting Jane Doe close to G1, Qingyi and Seth, so I think it's safe to assume that she is going to end up being of the same faction. Now the way that Jane is going to play out is going to be very unique. She is going to be an on-field anomaly character that is going to build up assault by building up her unique mechanic, the passion stream, while dealing damage, which will improve the rate at which she builds up anomaly, which in turn will lead to faster attack rotations and more overall damage. It's also important to note that each time you trigger anomaly, you're also going to be building up days on the enemy, and the way that anomaly damage works in this game is essentially the character is going to be doing little amounts of damage up until the point where they trigger the anomaly effect, which will then deal a big burst of damage, and then they will need to wait for the cooldown to then trigger that same anomaly effect again to be able to use it, or they would have another character proc a different anomaly effect, which would then trigger disorder. And that is kind of the way that you're going to be playing with Jane. Again, she's going to be an on-field DPS that is going to be all about building up anomaly and trigger assault much quicker than Piper, Corin or even Nekomata. Now there is still a lot that needs to be tested with Jane Doe in regards to how the anomaly damage is going to work out. Surely she is going to be able to trigger assault much quicker than all the A rank characters, and even faster than Nekomata because she is an attack character and not an anomaly character. But because she's going to be spending a lot of time on field, she may not necessarily enjoy having another anomaly character on the team to trigger disorder like Grace for example, and she may instead prefer having characters that are going to help increase her overall damage performance. So having a standard team of a main DPS, a stun character and a support character is likely going to work very well for Jane though. That being said, there currently is no support character that helps increase the anomaly build-up rate and even the overall damage that you deal with anomaly mastery, so you're going to be somewhat limited in the supports that you can use with Jane Doe. Thankfully, one of the A-rank characters that is going to be featured in Jane Doe's banner is going to be the new electric character, the Chargeblade main known as Seth. And while he's going to be a defender, I've been told several times that he's going to have some way of increasing the anomaly damage of other characters, so naturally he's going to combo perfectly with Jane Doe. So if that were the case, the final slot would be saved up for a stun character that is naturally going to help stun the enemy to make it so you can deal more damage while the enemy is stunned. Again, it should be noted that you're going to be able to build up a lot of days by proccing anomaly several times, but even with 2 anomaly characters, it simply may not be as effective as having a stun character on the team. And that is kind of the problem with Jane Doe, is that currently there's still a lot of unknown things about her, and it's mostly in regards to the characters that we're going to see in the future, because we don't have a character that boosts physical damage, we don't have a character that boosts anomaly damage, other than Seth, who is still a little bit unconfirmed, nor do we have a stun character that is specialized on building up anomaly as well. So I would say that the overall pull value for Jane is going to very much revolve around her exact numbers. How quick is she going to build up assault? How effective is Disorder going to be with Jane? How much value Seth is going to bring to Jane as well? And what are future characters going to bring to Jane that are going to make her even more powerful? There are a couple of specific concerns that I have with Jane, though if you are someone that has skipped Ju-1 and are maybe planning on skipping Qingyi, Jane's banner is going to offer a pretty well-rounded team with Seth and Anby, and these 3 are all going to work very well on the same team. Though naturally, if you end up getting Qingyi as well, you can totally replace Anby with Qingyi. Again, if you plan on going for more of a Disorder team, you can go with Jane, Grace and Seth. This team is totally going to focus on building as much anomaly as possible, proccing Assault with Jane, proccing Shock with Grace, which would then trigger Disorder, and Seth is there to increase the anomaly mastery. And finally, you can go for dedicated assault teams with Jane and Nekomata, and then for the stunner you would have Qingyi or Anby, or alternatively you could go for Jane and Piper, though I think it's safe to say that combining 2 assault anomaly characters is not going to be very effective. But these are my thoughts on these 2 upcoming S-rank characters. Let me know how you guys feel about them and if you are going to be pulling for each of them. I am going to be making a massive breakdown on Qingyi because we have access to the entirety of her kit, so I am very excited for that breakdown with you guys. But with that being said, subscribe to win the next 50-50, and if you don't, I owe you a cookie.